Hello, second graders. My name is Mr. Costanzo, and I'm going to tell you about one of my many passions, which is fly fishing.
Ooh, fly fishing. So, Mr. Costanzo, how did you first become curious about fly fishing?
Well, I actually kind of grew up with it. My dad used to take us fishing all the time, and I always noticed that he fished a little bit differently from everybody else, and I didn't realize that it was actually a special thing until I got much older, and then I realized that it was. So that's how I first became interested in it.
Do you know about how old you were when you started becoming curious about fly fishing or fishing with your dad and remembering that experience?
Well, I've fished with my dad ever since I could remember, so even being like a 2 or a 3-year-old. But I think I first started wanting to use a fly rod and fish like that when I was probably about 8 years old, so close to your age.
Yeah. Once you knew you were curious about fly fishing, how did you gather more information about it?
Well, it wasn't until long after that I had started doing it with my dad that I wanted to know more about the different techniques and different ways of doing it. So it was actually probably 15 years later. I was in my 20s, and that's when I started doing a little more research. And at the time, the internet was still fairly new, so I did look on some websites, but I also looked in some books. And I already knew how to do the basics, so I had learned from an expert, which was my dad. And then, yeah, looking in books and looking online.
Did you happen to go to any sports stores and ask people at the stores where they sold the equipment, what would be like the best
Yes.
equipment or anything like that?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that. So there used to be a store in Pittsford called Up the Creek, and when I visited there was a very friendly store owner who was very eager to give me any information I wanted to know. And he actually got me set up with certain types of flies and a couple other products that helped me be successful with fly fishing for trout in some of the local streams. And so that kind of reinvigorated my interest.
Once you learned more about fly fishing, how did you share your passion in learning about fly fishing with others?
Well, one of the first things I did when I started teaching at this school was something called a mini course. In the middle school, years ago, we used to have a mini course, which was basically anything that teachers had an interest in that was outside of your normal school stuff, like reading and math and music, which is what I teach. And so I decided to teach a class on fly fishing in the middle school. And I got several students interested in it. And there were a couple of times where I actually took students fly fishing. And, we caught some fish together, had a good time.
What about with your own kids, with Lila and Sebastian? Do you do fly fishing with either of them?
Both of them have used my fly rod and know the basics of how to use it. They haven't had a lot of practice on it yet, but mostly I've taken them fishing using a regular fishing pole. That, something you might see people using a little more commonly than a fly rod.
What advice would you give someone who is just starting to pursue something they are curious about or interested in?
Just keep going. There's no limit to what you can learn, and even when you think you're getting good, try to get better, because there's always something more you can do, or there's something new you can learn. And when you've gotten pretty good at it, please share it with somebody, because that's, it makes it even more worthwhile when you have a gift that you can share.
Okay, Mr. Costanzo, I have one more question that's not on my list, but just for the kids, could you explain the difference between fly fishing and regular fishing with a fishing rod that they might be used to?
Sure. Regular fishing pole, you cast your bait, whatever it is, out, to a place where the fish can eat it, and then obviously there's a hook there, and then you can reel them in. Fly fishing is very similar to that, except that you're dealing with very tiny, very light flies. They're fake, of course. And your job is to try to deliver that in a type of way that it looks like it's landing on the water naturally. So we're not using bobbers or sinkers or anything like that that would make a large splash or a plop in the water. A lot of times you're dealing with a stream that's pretty shallow. Maybe the water's moving just a little, pretty slowly, and the fish can pick up on any types of unnatural movement. So with a fly rod, you have a heavy line that floats, and the line has enough weight that when you cast it forward like that, it brings all the line out to where you want it to go. And then that line floats, and on the end of that line is another 7 to 10 feet of regular, more like regular fishing line called a leader, and your fly is on the end of that. And it takes a lot of skill to learn how to do this and to present the fly in a way that the fish don't get scared and that they think it's one of their natural foods so that they go after it and you can catch them. So,
Okay.
but some of the basic differences.
Thanks, Mr. Costanzo.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.